Alrighty, guys. Well, hey, welcome back. It's been a while, Lucas. Haven't seen you in a while, but glad to see you back and alive. Um, but today we have lots to talk about. Two Bad Batch episodes dropped, but today we're talking about episode 10. So let's get started. Jake, do you want to start off with a reaction for us?
Yeah, for sure. I think if someone told me that Star Wars child trafficking would be on my 2024 bingo card, I don't know if I would have believed it. Um, kind of a big episode, not necessarily what I was expecting for kind of a two-part episode. Because this one again focused almost exclusively on Emery as a character and some others. But overall reaction to the episode, we got a lot more on Project Necromancer, which was cool. Again, they're kind of making Emery to be this bigger character, so it was interesting to see that. As well, I felt like there were a lot of fun kind of cameos in this episode, and I thought the music was amazing. So yeah, general reaction to the episode. I was a little surprised by it in the sense of kind of the themes that were present. But overall, I mean, definitely an interesting episode for the season.
Yeah, agreed. Want to do a shout out to Kevin Kiner for his music for this season because I've been listening to Daily Routine from the Bad Batch album on repeat, and it's hype.
Facts, dude. Facts.
It is so good. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I love Star Wars with Force and Jedi, right? And the fact that they're melding it into Bad Batch now with like kind of the focus of Project Necromancer and it being like talking about the Force sensitive kids. It's a cool callback. I really like it, right? This has been kind of a theme we've seen across all the animated shows, and it's cool to see that it's all kind of becoming a focal point to what we're going to see in the future. So overall, I thought it was really cool, even though it was a slower episode. We got, and it didn't really like it like projected the story kind of in like a circle sort of thing. Didn't really give much to the forward progression of the story, but it still was super cool, and I liked what it added to it.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go a little bit against that then because I felt like it was slow, but it was very like fast paced. Like I was my intensity was high because I was very intrigued of what was gonna happen next. I mean, it's the whole episode pretty much starts off with a force sensitive child, Cad Bane, and what Project Necromancer actually is, right? And so like these huge reveals just back to back to back, um, I thought was very engaging and fast paced for a slow moving episode that had this like eerie music. That by the music's just ridiculous. Like it's so good. So I'm super glad that they already released the first half of the season's soundtrack because I've already been listening to it as well, Lucas.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing that happens, I wanted to get into a little bit of the little details that we can touch on before we get into the bigger stuff. But obviously, Cad Bane, force sensitive children, they have existed now across Clone Wars and Rebels, and now Bad Batch. There's been some form of kidnapping of force sensitive children, whether that's a bounty hunter or an inquisitor. It seems to be an integral part of this part of the Star Wars universe, which is really cool. It's like kind of a callback, but it's also progressing. Like, hey, Emperor Palpatine is still looking for force sensitive beings, for whatever the purpose is going to be.
Well,
So,
and one
thoughts
of the
on any of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things, obviously, Cad Bane was a big callback to those episodes in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Children of the Force, right, with the holocron, all that stuff, right? But the vibe that I actually kind of got watching the episode, and maybe it was because of the device that they kind of captured that first infant in. I was getting like really big Mandalorian vibes from it.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I was seeing like the Mandalorian and Grogu in that. And so again, like you're saying, it's not just this kind of like new thing that we're seeing, but again, to see kind of that continuity throughout the different series, right? The episodes of Children of the Force, the Inquisitors, in Rebels, and then moving forward to this idea in the Bad Batch and beyond, with the Empire really focused on, capturing these individuals with the high M count. That's kind of the vibe that I got from this episode. And kind of going back to something you said, I do feel like there were reveals in this episode, especially in regards to Project Necromancer, at least in some sense of what Nala Se was working on with these Force sensitive children, or these children with high M count, whatever you want to call it. I still feel like there's a large aspect of Project Necromancer that's still to be revealed, especially because we've seen kind of some moments where the Doctor goes into kind of this like sealed room, and there's those big red like canisters, or those big red tanks, whatever they are. They haven't revealed that aspect of it. So I felt like, there were some reveals in this episode, but I think there's still definitely more to come in that realm, personally. So
yeah. And Lucas, I'll give you a second on that.
Yeah.
Just adding one more piece of it that you can talk about is how secret Project Necromancer is, with like Grand Moff Tarkin having no clue what it's for.
Right.
And so keep going on that, Lucas, adding that piece to it.
Yeah, so I mean, that is the thing that's interesting to me, because if we call back, Cad Bane at the beginning, like in Clone Wars, was capturing these children just because, what we assumed was like the Sith wanting more recruits, right? Wanting more dark, like Jedis to turn into Sith, or like to turn these Force Jedi, right? And then in Rebels, we see that as well, where the Inquisitors are going after them so they can turn them into Inquisitors, right? So it's almost like each section kind of built into where we see now in Bad Batch, where it's a lot less about turning them into like soldiers and less into being like, okay, we need your blood because we need to test for something in the future, which we all assume is just like the cloning of Sidious and all that stuff, which we don't know. Like Jake said, there's still a huge part of Project Necromancer that I feel like it's going to come out, but we don't know yet. And the fact,
Lucas, sorry, with that, it makes you wonder if Clone Wars, was he actually trying to get train up Sith from younglings, or was he actually just trying to already start the cloning process with Cad Bane back then?
Yeah, which again, that would be a really, really cool thing to connect, because we really don't know why, why Cad Bane was kidnapping those children, other than he was like, I'm getting paid for it, right? Which is the same thing here now. It was interesting when that like conversation he had with Emery, where she's like, how many kids have you already taken? And he's just like, I'm really good at my job, right? That's all he says. He doesn't say a number because he's been doing this ever since. But the fact, kind of what you brought up, Jason, that is so interesting, that Grand Moff Tarkin, who is he's a Grand Moff, he's a very high ranking member of the Imperial regime, that he doesn't even know about Project Necromancer. He doesn't know what's going on there, which goes to show that Palpatine always had a secret agenda. He has the Empire. He has his overall, I want to rule the galaxy, but it's more than that. It's more complicated. I need to not only rule, but I need to basically set in stone set the foundation to where it will never topple. The Empire will never fall. And so it's interesting because we're going to see little key components with Emery starting to kind of doubt, and it's all these little tiny things that cause the Empire to fall in the end. So
well, and so one thing, going back to what you're saying, especially when in regards to Tarkin, and kind of this Imperial regime, the way that I kind of saw this scene was, one, it is surprising that Tarkin kind of doesn't know what's going on here. But the way that I kind of saw it was, I kind of had a Rogue One type feel to this episode, where it's always in the Empire, it's like every man for himself. Everyone's trying to claw their way to the top. And the way that I saw this was there's kind of a little bit of a power struggle between Hemlock and Tarkin, because I think Hemlock's trying to keep this as secretive as possible, because if Tarkin finds out about this, then Tarkin's going to find some way to take all the credit for it, right? And at the end of the day, everyone's trying to have the best relationship with the Emperor so that they can work their way up in the Empire. So that was kind of the interesting thing that I was getting from this, is you have this unique power struggle between Tarkin and between Hemlock, where Tarkin's like, okay, you got to deliver on these things, otherwise we're cutting you, But at the same time, too, Hemlock has to be really careful with what he actually reveals, because Tarkin could just take it all away, and we saw that in Rogue One with Tarkin and Galen Erso, or not Galen Erso, but the other one. Why am I
Director
blanking on his?
Krennic, Director Krennic.
Yeah, with Krennic. Again, where you have kind of them clashing and butting heads on the Death Star, right? So it's kind of just every man for himself when it comes to the Empire. But I thought having Tarkin in the episode was really cool to kind of show that power struggle, and again, like you're saying, how important this is to the Empire.
Well, and thinking about it a little more, it almost feels like when Hemlock talks about them being kids, it almost sounds like he's making the best with what he has, because the Emperor took away so many of the M count heavy adults, right, through Order 66. And so Nala Se, obviously, I want to get into that conversation in a minute, but hearing Emery kind of taking that step back and saying, well, these are kids, and Hemlock being, oh, well, we're kind of working with what we have to work with. It's kind of interesting to think maybe Palpatine went too far with Order 66, and he's trying to piece back together what it just didn't work out the way he wanted it to, almost. Like it was too absolute or something like that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I mean, I think that he's the kind of guy that just like doesn't regret anything. At least that's from like my point of view. Yeah, he's like, I needed the Jedi to be eradicated because they're the only people that could stop me, right? Especially if he didn't get like, if Obi-Wan was still kind of in prime action, he would have been like a formidable foe. But there was a bigger stuff at stake, and so I think he had to like get rid of the Jedi as quickly as possible. And at that point, it's like, okay, here's a chief scientist. Here, Hemlock, you figure it out. These are the kids. There's kids out there who have high midichlorian count. Go use them, because you're not going to find Jedi. If they do, we're going to kill them. That's not going to work. So it's almost like he did that in kind of like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bulldoze the way through, and then you just pick up the pieces after me and you figure it out. And so I think that's kind of how Palpatine is, where he's just like, I'm going to do this because I want to do it, and I'm going to bulldoze anyone who gets in my way. And then all the people who want to follow me, you pick up after my pieces, and you're the one that have to solve this in the end.
Yeah. Well, I think I definitely agree with Lucas on that. I think the Emperor is someone who doesn't regret what he's done. And I think he's very deliberate with it. And I think the biggest example of this, specifically in regards to the Jedi, would be people like Kanan Jarrus, and as well, thinking on like Cal Kestis, like those type characters who survived Order 66, even though they were, younglings or they were younger Padawans, they were able to kind of rise up and become these formidable opponents to the Empire. So I think the largest thing there is it's easier to control a people if they're in ignorance, right? So a lot of these kids don't necessarily know why they've been chosen, right? You hear the specimens, the kids throughout the episode are like, we just want to go home. Like we don't know why we're here. They took us for whatever reason, and they don't know that the reason that they're being kept is because they have this ability that other people don't. Whereas if you capture a bunch of Jedi, right, they know who they are, and they're not just going to be complacent in that, right? So I think that it's definitely a deliberate act on Sidious's side. But yeah, definitely kind of tough, because it would have been a lot easier to just, farm all of the younglings from the Jedi Temple and just use them all,
Yeah. And so let's get into the bulk of it, right? We already talked about how Emery's kind of the focal point of the episode, and she's seeing, we're kind of experiencing everything as Emery is, right? And so every time she's shocked, we're kind of shocked. And when she's confused, we're confused. When she goes to visit Nala Se, that's probably what we would have done, is gone to see what actually was going on, right? And so her encounter with Nala Se honestly was one of the most interesting parts of the episode for me, because Nala Se kind of looked at her and was like, you realize now like why I did what I did, and now you know the importance of why I did what I did. Do you guys have any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of knew that Nala Se was kind of against the Empire since the beginning, right? Um, ever since she was captured, ever since she like worked with Omega, and all of a sudden she had an affinity with Omega, and she wanted to stop this basically because the Empire destroyed her people, you know, kidnapped her basically, and forced her to do something that she doesn't want to do, unethical like tests and experiments on, on the clones, on the kids, right? And now on someone that she holds very dear to her. And so it was interesting to kind of see that Omega, through like the entire time that she had her interactions with Emery, she was just like, Emery, you are like me. Like you and I were sisters. We are the same. And I wonder if the conversation, like as soon as Nala Se saw Emery walk in through into her cell, she got a flashback of Omega and was just like, oh, here's Omega coming back. Like here's Omega speaking, right? And that's probably why she was very inclined to help Emery instead of being kind of closed off like she was with Hemlock. And so I thought this conversation was awesome because it was something that set up again one of those little moments that it's gonna end up becoming the Emperor's downfall, right?
Yeah. I think just speaking to what you were saying, kind of that the interaction between Nala Se and Emery, like the only thing I think I could also add to that is it's interesting. Again, right? We kind of get to see into how tough Nala Se's job was, and how she was really trying to kind of like hold things together, especially when like, it's just such a bad situation for these like force sensitive kids and stuff. But like Lucas was saying, I feel like there's this moment at the end where Emery's kind of walking out. I don't remember the specific dialogue, but she's kind of like, like, what can I do? Like, I don't have any power here, And Nala Se kind of questions that. She's like, but like, do you? Like, is that like, what can you do? And like Lucas was saying, this could end up being the Empire's downfall in this specific situation, right? Is maybe like by moving into this role, Emery's kind of softened enough to actually help out these people. Because you can see that Omega was working really hard on Emery throughout the time that she was there. But now you have kind of these other kids come in, and I think you kind of witness her heart kind of softening when she gives the doll to the one prisoner at the end, right? And that was something that she never would have done when Omega was there, because she would always take the dolls away from her, right? And so, yeah, I think there's a lot at work there, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where she fits in once everything finally shakes out in the end.
Yeah. Well, she did give the doll back to Omega in the end, but yeah, she took it away. She punished her, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I totally agree. Omega started easing her up, and I think Nala Se's conversation helped her realize how much of the power she has now that she's the chief scientist. So yeah, obviously it's all building up to be this huge thing, right? So 4 more episodes. I mean, I honestly feel like Emery's already leaning to be Team Omega versus, Team Hemlock, who she's already loyal to. She's obviously going to stay loyal for the foreseeable future to Hemlock, but when it comes down to it, you already can see the signs of her, committed to Omega and the kids. So really interesting to see. Just curious, any last thoughts before we give it our scores?
I think one other cool thing, just in the realm of Easter eggs, this was actually the first episode that they name dropped Scorch specifically. So they've had Commander Scorch in this for this whole time, right? One of the clone commandos from Delta Squad from the Republic Commando game series. But this was the first one that they officially named him, which was kind of cool. Again, we know it's him. The markings on the armor are the same, but cool that they finally give him a name. So
yeah, that's super cool.
All
right, Lucas. Well, what do you got? What are you rating this?
I'm gonna give this episode 8.5, which I think is I think is a fair rating just because of how, kind of like what you said, it was a slower episode, like I mentioned at the beginning, but it was so cool to kind of see, yeah, again, like the force sensitive, right? And the fact that like at the beginning we see the force sensitive kid, and the kids are like, oh, they say he's cursed, right? They're like, the people are already starting to forget about the Jedi, and that's kind of cool that they're bringing that kind of back, almost kind of like in a low hush tones, and how the entire episode was just talking about that, and Emery kind of coming to this delusion or this thought process of like, oh, maybe the Empire isn't all that it's cracked up to be, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe I don't want to be the chief scientist anymore. Maybe I want to figure out how Omega escaped, and I want to do that too. So 8.5 because of just the feelings, like the whole vibe was different, and it was a good different, right? So
as I was going through the episode, I can go next. I wasn't incredibly impressed with this episode. I think, like you guys said, it did move the plot along really well, and I thought there were some great moments. But when I just think about kind of like going back and rewatching this episode, this wouldn't really be like top of mind for me. That being said, the music and a lot of the elements that we discussed kind of brought that score back up for me. My final rating for it would be a 7 out of 10. Again, I think the music really pushed it over the edge. Kevin Kiner's been cooking this season of Bad Batch. So that definitely brought it up. But yeah, I think in the realm of rewatching, like, great episode to give light to the things that are going on in this season and really kind of in the background for all of the Bad Batch. But if I was going to go back and watch this versus a different episode, I don't know if this would be high on my list. So for that reason, gave it a 7 out of 10.
Okay. And I'm definitely pretty contrary to that. I'm going to go 8.75. This is one of my favorite episodes of the entire season. One of the best episodes of all of Bad Batch for me, just because I have random episodes throughout all of Star Wars that, like, I just can rewatch, and I feel like this is one of them, and I think a lot of it has to do with the music. That's a huge portion of it.
Yeah.
But also these big conversations. I think everything that was said in this episode was like such a large thing to be said. What Emery says to Cad Bane, how Cad Bane responds, Nala Se's conversation, Hemlock's conversation with Tarkin, Emery's conversation with the kids. Like, everything is said was just like deep, and it wasn't just like, random crap that has been said in these other episodes that were supposed to be bigger in my mind. And so for that, it's just an episode that's not going to rip my heart out a million times over, like season 7 finale of Clone Wars, where, that one can sometimes be harder to watch. But it's good enough that, like, I would throw this one on in the background, or I would rewatch this one if I'm trying to skim through to recap the entire series. So, definitely a higher score for me for that. So yeah, 8.75. But yeah, overall, we love where it's going, right?
Yep. Agreed.
So, all right, guys. Well, hey, we'll catch you on episode 11. Thanks.